So just a little bit about me before we start, because I didn't get the chance to talk to you over email. My name's Dorian. I just started at Pitch Labs like 2 weeks ago, give or take. And they threw me into
Okay.
such a cool interview and coincidentally with a company that I already knew. So it's really cool. I'm really excited for this opportunity. But before we get into it, I just want to know like, what's your story like from a very early age? Like, just give us the overall brand of like you and HoopSwagg. Like, just give us a quick little introduction so the people that out there, might not be super familiar can get into it.
Yeah. So my name's Brennan Agronoff, and so I started HoopSwagg when I was 13 years old, but my story kind of started before that. I was I don't know if you want to call it a weird kid, whatever, but I got like obsessed with selling stuff online.
What is the story? Like, how did you get into the sock world? I mean, it's such a, a mundane thing. I feel like kids aren't really into socks. Whenever you open it up at Christmas, you get disappointed. I'm just curious to hear, how did you come to socks?
I was born and raised in Portland, and because of that, like all my friends' parents basically worked at Nike in one capacity or another. And I don't even know if you'll know what these are, but have you ever seen those socks with like the little blocks on them? They're called like Nike Elite socks.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, so those had first come out right in like 2011, 2012. And they were like 14, $16. I thought it was just absolutely absurd anyone would pay that much for a pair of socks, but everybody started wearing them. And at the time, there's only like four colors. So I saved up like all my money one summer, bought a pair of these, and was just obsessed. And so were like the rest of my friends that I was playing basketball with, because I was like playing a bunch of youth sports at the time. And they were all like, "Oh, where can you get those?" And so instead of giving them the site, I was like, "I'm just going to figure out how to make these." They're literally spent a couple months online, like doing research in all the random forums you could, talking to screen printing shops, just trying to figure out how you could actually like even print socks. And then once I kind of had figured that part out, I figured out it cost like two or three thousand dollars basically for the smallest like setup printer you could get and everything. And so I basically got set up with that in my garage at age 13 and just started selling stuff on eBay to start. And like I think the business exclusively existed on eBay for like 6 months, and then I finally got a website.
Super cool. Yeah. No, I kind of assumed that you had to have played like youth basketball at some point because those like Nike Elite socks were all over the place and like only the cool kids kind of had them with like the KDs on or whatever, playing. That's
Yeah.
that's how you knew someone was like a level above the rest. So no, that really makes sense. And that's really where I heard of your brand for the first time. My friend like had mentioned it and it kind of like came back. I had like a flashback almost when I heard about this interview because my friend was wearing like the Galaxy like colorway,
Oh yeah.
the Hoops Flag socks, and I was like, oh, those are so cool. Like I haven't seen those like on the Nike website yet. Like, where'd you get those? And like I just really reconnected it like back at this time, very similar. And so
Nostalgia. Yeah.
absolutely no, I was like, this is a crazy throwback with the Nike Elite socks. I hope people are still wearing them. Well, clearly they are. Hoopswag's still going,
Yeah.
but I guess I'm not playing youth sports anymore. And so just touching back on like your early start with HoopSwagg, you mentioned a ton of time just like the research and sort of all this buildup that had to go into it. What was the process like for when you were starting your own business as a younger person? Were there any like mentors or methods of study that you use in order to sort of build up the knowledge that you needed to start the business?
I would say both my parents were somewhat mentors in a way. They were really good. Like that's a whole kind of other thing in terms of my relationship with them, but it's kind of like this weird thing where like they're involved in the business. They're still my parent. I mean, I'm literally like a child, like 13 years old. And so there's like some sort of weird balance to it all so like in that way I consider them probably my biggest mentors. I had a couple other people in like the community that like would not give advice, but like would like interact with on a business level, which was good, to kind of get your feet wet a little bit, and they didn't need to. But like my methodology for learning things, and this really still stays true to like today, like I just want to understand things myself before like I don't know, especially with all the like social media and stuff. It's crazy. Like I didn't really have that around when I got started, like all the entrepreneurship, social media kind of BS. Like I basically learned how to do everything inside of this business, and I could do every single step before I even considered like outsourcing it. And like I see a lot of people now like go outsource stuff, and it's like I had actually figured out how to build the website. I did the design. I figured out how to make the printers work. I mean, I worked my ass off to do all this, right? I remember staying up to like 2 a.m. making socks in the middle of the night to have socks ready for a tournament the next day. And like my methodology was like I'm just very interested in understanding how things work, and like that still kind of rolls over to where I get to like today. I just want to keep learning things. And so the business was honestly more of a vehicle for me to learn new stuff rather than like this huge profit machine, if you will. Like there was a lot of things that we did that might not have made the most money, but like provided a lot of ROI for me personally in terms of like learning stuff.
And I think it's very honest of you to say like, it wasn't all perfect at first and you went and without like the complete understanding, as any 13-year would, of the whole, business in the field. I think it's really cool that you talk about these sort of opportunities to still learn even while you have the business. But I'm sure it wasn't all, sunshine and rainbows. Would you touch on like some of the most difficult parts of starting that business? I mean, you talk about, making socks up at 2 a.m. for the, for the game the next day. I feel like there have to be more stories like that and just things of that nature.
A couple major ones, like early on. Number one was like we were selling a ton on Amazon, and one day they just like shut you off during Christmas, which is when we made all of our money. No, they don't have any good reason. They just like put you in timeout. And so, I mean, we got shut off, and that basically, I think we thought it would kill the whole business basically, because you have to make your money during Christmas. And that was a whole, like, I had to pay like $6,000 to get a legal letter written to basically get turned back on. So like that was a whole thing. Another one is like, we were like, okay, we're going to move away from like Nike Elites. We're going to design our own socks. Well, the thought of like trying to manufacture in China for a 15-year-old, you're like, I'm not going to do that. And so I at least like tried to find someone domestically to do it. So we've got this mill in North Carolina, did all these samples, all this stuff, got them ready. We ordered them, and then what shows up is like literally nothing like what we ordered. They're unusable. And again, like that was a big chunk of cash at the time. And one of those things that like we ended up turning it around and made it work, but like total mess. And we're like, I don't even know if this is gonna like work out, right? There's all these things you just kind of get when you're running like a small business that are pretty substantial setbacks. But I don't know, at this point, I'm kind of used to them. I feel like they just happen.
I'm sure. And looking back, would you have done anything differently? Like now, I mean, obviously you have all this information and like knowledge, and also it's a completely different world, but within the startup phase, I mean, like, was there anything where you're like, I really misstepped there? Like I would have gone back and done that differently.
I don't know that there's anything necessarily. Like, I feel like so much of it goes by so fast. Like, you definitely like make a couple mistakes here and there. I've sent some really stupid emails, I know, to like our email list over the years. I'm like, probably shouldn't have done that. But no, I mean, also, I'm kind of convinced all this stuff kind of ends up playing out for one reason or another. And so, I don't know. I wouldn't say I have like a lot of regrets or anything about it.
Sweet. No, that's good. I feel like, if I started a business when I was like 13 years old, I would have tons of regrets. Very cringy teen, but, and you mentioned before starting off in like such a small town, and like with HoopSwagg, how did you go about advertising, even though it started off so small, and like, the digital age had just started to come about? I guess besides the website that you would learn to develop yourself, what else was there in terms of advertisement?
So yeah, the website, like do you even know what Magento is? Have you ever heard of that?
Don't believe so, no.
Like extreme enterprise Shopify that I started on. So I started on Magento, and then I got on Shopify. But a lot of the marketing that happened at first was, first off, we were sending like a lot. We figured out basically that like if I could get people to subscribe to this email list, whether it be through like signups at in-person tournaments or online, whatever it was, like if I just send them emails every week with new designs, they'll keep buying stuff. So that was one part of it. And then the second part was like, okay, that's great. We've kind of figured out that model, but like, how do you continue to grow that list? And so we were doing like influencer marketing on Instagram before that was even like a thing. I figured out you could basically send socks to these guys with like 100,000 followers that just wanted to take pictures of their shoes, and they would wear them and post about them for free. And I was out the cost of a pair of socks. So I like got in tight with a bunch of those people in that community and was just sending socks to everyone. And so that generated a bunch of, first off, like content for us. And then second, like they're posting to their followers all the time. Now that's known as like influencer marketing. I didn't even know what it was at the time. I was like, this is great. So is that a combination of the in-person stuff? We sold on Amazon, and we're sending like inserts in the packages. And so it was just like a very kind of like slow growth thing. And like a lot of companies now do like Facebook ads. We did a little bit of it, but like it didn't ever really work necessarily for us. And so it was a lot more kind of organic growth than anything.
All right, that's really cool. And then from that, like, when did you start to realize like that this was going to work? Were there any like big turning points, or was there like a certain tournament where like people were signing up? I mean, what made you know that this was going to be successful?
That's a good question. I don't know if I ever had a very clear sign. It was like, obviously these are well received and there's demand for them like that. I don't see it as much anymore because we don't do really in-person stuff anymore, but the in-person stuff was cool because you'd always see like actual, like, so different people browsing on a website. It's just not the same. But I think when we started, there was a point where we got a lot of teams that were ordering them, and I was like, oh, this is really gonna like turn into something. And then when I had this like whole article thing hit, it was strange because the business tripled overnight from these articles, like me being 17 selling socks. And I was like, oh, now we're actually legit, even though the article was published saying we're legit. That like way legitimatized it. So I don't know, there's a couple different like inflection points in that. regard, but it was very much so like, there was never like a clear, like, oh, this is going to work or this is not going to work. It was like, oh, this is kind of working. It's kind of working, and just kind of like kept working.
Right. Especially when like Amazon's trying to shut you down or something. I feel like it's kind of hard for there to be like
Yeah.
certain points where you're like, this is totally going to work. Right. And that's so cool. Can you walk us through sort of like that early process of like making your first few pairs of socks versus like what it's turned into today? Like,
Yeah, so when we started, so we use a process that's called dye sublimation. So basically you can print it, think of it as like a special paper that special ink sits on top of. Of course, they have these like special printers that can only do this kind. And then when you put it in a heat press, the ink leaves the paper and goes into the fibers of the sock. And so like the first pairs I ever did, once I figured out that was the process you needed, I literally happened to have some kid on my basketball team's dad happened to have like a tiny heat press and a tiny like printer. So I was able to print on like these quarter of a sock to just prove that it worked. And so then that was like the proof of concept. Then I got my own stuff in my garage, which was like one heat press and one small printer. And then we basically kept adding more and more printers and more heat presses until I grew out of my garage. Then we started in like a small space. And then we're like, oh, we're going to figure out where we upgraded from these like desktop printers to these like 35-inch wide printers that I can print 7 times as fast or whatever, and they're cheaper. And so we did that for a couple years, and we kind of maxed that out. We got up to like 8 or 10 of those. And then we got to these giant ones that are like literally the size of cars. There's only like 400 of them or something in the entire US at this point. There's like not very many. They're these massive machines. So now we have like 2 of those, and our heat presses went from like the size of a t-shirt one to like, those are also size of like large vehicles now. They're like these huge machines that we were able to like standardize the process. And like, that's been a whole part too, is like the actual manufacturing process we've gotten very efficient at. But like we built systems around all of this. And so the actual like manufacturing process evolved a ton. At the core, it's the same like technology, but like all of the tools and technology have like, from when we started to now, it's incredible. Like it would have taken 20 people basically full time to run this system that's all done by software now. And so that's been like a huge, what I've spent a lot of my time on in the business over the past 5-6 years has been the technology side and like improving the manufacturing process more than anything.
that's so cool. It's interesting to hear that it hasn't, moved on super much, but that's so crazy that you had to spend all that time. And I guess like the name of the game for you has always been sort of collaboration and, like working with people like within your town. Like that's so like, what a great coincidence that this guy has like a heat presser like in his garage.
It's bizarre.
Absolutely bizarre thing to have in your garage, but very handy for you. And I guess moving on in the name of collaboration, how many employees do you think you have right now? Just ballparking.
Right now, it's probably like 5 or 10 pretty consistently throughout the year. And then during Christmas, it spikes up to like 50 or 60 probably.
That makes sense. And how was that experience with like, transferring from like such a small like personal business to like hiring those first few employees? Like how did you go about looking for the right people and like making sure that you were staying true to your brand while still, trying to make it more manageable?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff we hired for anyways is like the actual making of the socks. And so it's not like these are these massive personality hires or like role hires, but a lot, dude, they started out as my mom's friends, to be honest. Like they wanted this like 3 or 4 hours to work in the garage or whatever. And then it's been like some of their kids or kids from high school would come work. And even now, like a lot of our people have been with us for like 5 or 6 years at least and have kind of like grown with the company. They're still like, it's honestly a bunch of moms still, to be honest. And there's like 1 or 2 kind of like young dudes that work there, but it's been that, and a lot of the seasonal help is college. Like, so we've kind of like worked with what we've got, but yeah, I mean, I was 15 or 16 when we started hiring and I didn't know what I was doing. My mom was like, oh, my friend Cindy wants to get paid for a couple hours worth of work or whatever. And so then it's just kind of like naturally progressed.
That's crazy. That's so funny and crazy. And again, small hometown collaboration, it works out perfectly in your favor.
Yeah.
So then I guess what leadership qualities do you think that you've developed in having this business? And like, 50 people is like pretty big amount. Like, how do you find that you've evolved as a leader, and like what qualities do you think have come from, sort of micromanaging this task?
More than anything, I'd say the one thing I've taken away from running this business and interacting with people and all of that is like quick decision making. Like there's some decisions, yes, you think on, but like for the most part, you end up making so much more progress by just like making quick decisions and moving on it. And like part of that is probably what makes me decent at business is I have a good gut indicator of making the right decisions quickly. But all the people that I've interacted with that have been like most successful in business and people I might want to emulate, all just like think and act very quickly on things that they can. And you basically just end up getting more shots on goal than if you were to sit around and think about things. And most of the decisions never end up even mattering anyways. And so maybe call it quick decision making or just decision making and decisiveness in the first place. But it's probably one of the most important things I picked up over the years. And same with like kind of related to that, we've had situations where like you have bad people and you know they're bad, and we've had situations where you let it drag on and now it's just like, oh, cut it, move on, get the hard thing over with, and then forget it happened, sort of thing. So yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. And in that, learning these qualities, what do you think is one quality that you think is like absolutely necessary? Like if you had to give any young entrepreneur a piece of advice or a quality that they feel like they need to develop in order to try and be successful, what do you think that would be?
The desire to learn. And I don't know that it's a quality you can like make yourself have if you don't necessarily have some, like, I think there are just things like I went to school for however many years and I never found any of it in the slightest interesting until I had this business and I was like, oh, I can actually take this and apply it to real life. And then it started getting interesting to me, some of the stuff like when they talk about like you've never used calculus, I never thought I would. And I've had situations where like I actually have seen this, not in the math form, but like the conceptual understanding of how calculus works somehow applies to business. Like I love how these concepts fit together, and it's cool to have something in real life to like apply that to. Which then also is like the one other most important thing I think I figured out early on was like I figured out how I learn effectively. Like I got really good at teaching myself to learn things. And so like if I want to go learn something, me personally, I'm going to go watch videos on it and then I'm going to try to recreate it myself. Some people read from books, some people talk to others, whatever it is, like figure that out early and you'll be able to teach yourself a lot of things.
Right. And in terms of like videos, like I feel like the biggest one has got to be like YouTube. Are there any other like, forms of videos or like websites that you look to like help yourself learn new concepts or?
No, I mean, I'd say honestly, like pretty much everything I've learned has been off YouTube. I've tried all those like Udemy courses. I never got behind those. The other interesting thing that like not everyone can do, but I figured out is actually really effective is like once you end up with like the resources to do so within a business, it really is like a learning machine. Like I've been able to hire people that are paid well, but I basically end up paying them to do their job, but then at the same time extract their life's knowledge out of them. So like we hired this developer or whatever, and I basically ended up not accidentally, but like I basically taught myself to code by following what this guy did or whatever. And then we hired like in this new business, we're running a fulfillment center. We ended up hiring this guy who came in and did like rate negotiations with carriers, total black box to me before, but like you pay him on whatever the contract is for 2 years. And like, I can go do that on my own now. So it's like, I not only was it a cost to the business, but like I also treat it as like the cost to learn. And like, once you get into running a company and having the resources to do this, I actually think it's way cheaper to purchase knowledge than it is to go learn it yourself. But like you kind of have to build up to be able to get there.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. And I guess since we're talking about collaborating again, what are the sort of, outside of like the employees who sort of work in the factory, as you mentioned, like which aren't like super huge, like personality hires, when you're looking for people to collaborate with, even outside of HoopSwagg, just in your other business endeavors, like what do you look for in like a positive partner? Like what are the ideals?
I mean, honestly, the top, like I've worked with so many people over the last however many years, and I would say the one indicator or like attribute that all the good people have is responsiveness. Like responsiveness to emails and whatever it is, right? Like they're very responsive, and it doesn't mean that they're going to have like a complete thing, but like they're just on top of it. And then it's so weird. There's these categories of people. Some people are responsive, and then you run into some that just like literally will not reply for 3 days, and it's the most bizarre thing to me. And they're in one of the two categories. That, and then also like finding people who think independently versus like trying to support all the ideas that like, I don't know, it's always been in these, I have never run like a big corporate company, like top down sort of thing. Everyone I've worked with has been pretty much contractors in some capacity. And a lot of the time contractors are so scared they're going to get fired because you're technically their boss or whatever, or they're working for you. Like, I really value the independent thinking that people can like bring to the table versus just like saying whatever they need to try to like exist as long as possible. But yeah, responsiveness, like 10 out of 10 almost always will filter out poor candidates.
That's really cool. That's really cool. I feel like that's like my biggest pet peeve, even like my personal life, is just like people not responding to messages. And I think like that's a really good way to put it, is that there really are just two categories of people who will respond and people who won't. And sort of a head turn here, but this is one of the things that I was like primarily curious for our audience is that what has been some of the biggest surprises for you, like within the industry, like either positive or negative, I guess outside of like legal issues, it's
Yeah. I think that like there's just no one has any clue what they're doing for the most part. Like I love talking to people that have done like really successful things and you talk about them how they get there and like they didn't know what they were doing for the most part. They were just trying stuff. And like it's weird because without being in an industry and like meeting others and talking to them and exchanging experiences, like I think it's really easy to be like, oh my God, like there's this crazy plan in place that these other companies are acting on or doing this or that. And like I feel like most people are just kind of figuring it out day by day. There's definitely some like geniuses out there that have these crazy plans that do this. But like the majority of people that are even running small businesses or whatever, they're just trying to figure out what they could do to like bring home money at the end of the day. But there's no like master plan behind any of this. And then also there's a lot of just dirty like business that I've seen done that I'm shocked that like, I don't know. I feel like I was raised with like somewhat of an ethical code, I would like to think. And there's a lot of things that not necessarily as much in the like e-com sock business as much, but some of the like other, we get into like running a fulfillment center and stuff. There's just like a lot of things that I'm just baffled by where I'm like, I cannot believe someone thought that was like okay to do. But then like you recognize it and understand and then kind of just approach situations with a bit of a edge to it, I guess, or like considering that there people may have malintentions, like it never necessarily made sense to me. But no, I mean, I think it's really not that much bad. Like that's really the kind of only bad thing I have to say, but really just the fact that like everyone else is kind of figuring out, and if it's working for someone else, it's probably going to work for you. So like, doesn't mean it's going to, but like so many things that have been like breakthroughs for our company has been me talking to like someone that I ended up meeting and figuring, like I said, like my favorite thing is figuring out like new knowledge. And like, oh, you're doing this, it works well, like yada, yada, yada. Let me go try it. Probably is going to work for you.
Great. And now is the time you're waiting for. I feel like you've been talking about this fulfillment center, like dropping hints of it here and there. Can you talk a little bit about like now that you've had success within the industry, can you give us a little bit about some of the other companies that you've been working on and like anything cool that you're getting into right now?
I spend most of my time now on a company that's called Warehance, which is basically the software for warehouses or brands that are like shipping for themselves. So kind of like what HoopSwagg would have used 10 years ago. We'd like built like a custom system for HoopSwagg that like saved a ton of time and efficiency with training and labor and all of this. And then when we started Nitro, we got on software for this that was crazy expensive and didn't work well. And then I was like, I built this for HoopSwagg. Why not go do this for basically other fulfillment centers? And so that's what I spend like a good chunk of my time on now. That's honestly more fun than anything, just because like it's just like tough problem after tough problem to solve, and I get to do all these new things. It's still all the like learning stuff. And so that's really fascinating. And it's like the socks, there's like so much you can learn, and then you kind of like, I got most of it. This feels like endless. Like there's never ending things to figure out. And so that's why this is fun and why I'm doing it now.
Right. That makes sense. And what do you find? Do you still find like, because you mentioned that HoopSwagg is special to you, do you still find that to be like sort of like your golden child, like your baby almost? Is there always going to be like a soft spot in your heart for HoopSwagg?
Oh, of course. Yeah. It's like, I mean, it is my child pretty much. So yeah, it's like, it'll never disappear, I don't think.
Right. No, that makes sense. And I guess, what are your long-term goals like for HoopSwagg? You mentioned like this sort of like, expansion of ordering and stuff, but do you think that there's ever a world where it moves into more than just like fashion and socks, or is it just going to sort of stay? I mean, like, could there be more broad fashion, I suppose, opposed to like sort of this athleisure wear sort of deal, or no?
Honestly, I don't think so. I don't think it's ever going to progress beyond socks. Like adding new products like that is really tough, and especially when it's something that like we're not going to spend a ton of time on. Probably not. We might add oven mitts or something that we already sell, but yeah, I don't think it'll be anything crazy. If anything, it's more like for gifts at this point. And like people still buy them for basketball teams and stuff, but I'd say it's like half people buying them for teams, half people like just gifting them to their kids.
Right. I know. I saw the ties on there, and I was like, I don't know if anyone's gonna be wearing a tie like while they're playing basketball, but I was curious to see about that. And then I guess, do you have any sort of final words of advice for anyone wanting to start their own business? People who, might be too timid or afraid to sort of break into this space, especially at a younger age?
No, I mean, I think the main thing is like I kind of touched on it a little bit, but it's like just understand no one else has any clue what they're doing, the same way you probably feel like you have no way or no idea what you're doing. Um, and especially like I don't know, I like I said, I didn't grow up with the social media. I feel like I would be a different person if I grew up in the world that like business social media is now. I find a lot of it to be kind of just garbage for the brain. And some of the most like interesting people and businesses are the dudes selling like little parts for pipes, like it's just crazy. Like there's so many businesses out there. And so like do something that you're interested in, that you care about and find genuinely interesting. Otherwise it's going to end up feeling like work. But like when you find things that you are genuinely curious about and want to learn about, it doesn't feel like work. And if the outcome of that is money, then fantastic. But if not, then at least you've like learned something. And like my journey of all my stuff has been like I learned something and I was like, oh, I can go apply it here. I learned something and go apply it here. And that's like how all these businesses kind of sprouted up. Um, but it all comes back to like just continually being sure to stay curious and understand that you're probably never going to figure it out and no one else will either, but ask a lot of questions and just absorb information and make new connections.
And then my real final last fun question for you is, what is your biggest accomplishment? Like, what is your favorite piece do you think that you've ever created for HoopSwagg?
Oh, my favorite piece I've ever created. Oh gosh, that's a good question. Like, are we talking like design on there?
You can make it whatever you want. It could be a personal story. It could be favorite design.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think actually probably so we've got these goat ones that are actually some of the original pictures I sold when I was like 8 or 9 or whatever. Those are good just because full circle on that. And obviously those I don't know which Galaxy ones you have, but I have there's these 4 pairs of Galaxy socks. I got one of them framed that were like the original 4, and like that's got a special place as well.
No, for sure, for sure. I feel like those are the ones that I've definitely seen the most of. Like anyone that I know that's used your website have. I think it's like the purplish blue pair. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that I feel like those were like the most popular. Like my friends always used to wear those back in like 2014 when we go play like basketball at the park. So much, Brendan, for taking the time to talk with us again today. You definitely gained like a new and I guess like returning fan today. It's really cool. I like get this full circle sort of teenage basketball players, socks back into it. And I wish you the best and tons more success in the future.
Thank you, man.